Okay, let's get started with making a modern law. Today, we're going to look at the making of modern law. Now, what I thought I was just looking through what your holdings are, and I think you've only got one archive in the series, but I want to give you a sort of an overview about this particular series because it's a really influential series that we have at Gale. It's one of as one of our senior managers once said, ships of the line. There's Making a Modern Law, there is the Echo, which is the 18th century collections, the 19th century collections. These are huge mammoth undertakings, and they're very unique archives. So what we'll look at the series. I'll showcase what's in the series, and then we'll go through an overview of the archive that you've got today with a little bit of a story that I put together. And I'll showcase the platform features and functionality using the archive to draw out the example that we talk about. But if you think about why one would study legal history, there's a classic example that I'll come through in a couple of slides is an individual called Oliver Wendell Holmes, who is an American jurist. He served as the Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, and he was really influential for his opinions and writings on free speech, due process, and judicial restraint. Now, he was very instrumental in writing a book called The Common Law, he wrote that many years before he actually sat on the Supreme Court. But that book, The Common Law, is about the common law in United States. It includes things like property, laws on crime, and things like that. It's written as a series of lectures. And one of the famous quotes that he says is that a page of history is worth a volume of logic, because legal history is a really important aspect of how governments and societies and private groups solve their problems over time. And what we can see in this particular archive is the study of law and how law has evolved and why it has evolved as well. And essentially, law is dedicated to the pursuit of understanding, or rather the study of law is to understand how law is effectively changed in the context to laws of the past. I mean, in the past, if you look at some books, it talks about, crimes like adultery people should be stoned to death. Thankfully, we don't do that anymore, although we don't also advertise for crimes like adultery. But it just shows us how these laws have evolved as society has evolved. So the Making of Modern Law series is one of our longest running archival series, first published in 2004, and it covers all aspects of American law as well as British law. Now, what's really important about that is much of Australia's law is based on laws that have been, existing in Britain. And many of the laws that were existing in Britain have sort of evolved over time. If you trace its roots back, you'll find that much of American law has its roots in British law, much of Australia's law from British law, and even much of the colonies across the world as well, where Britain colonized. Places like India, the Asia, wherever Britain went and established colonies, they established their laws, and those laws evolved as these countries gained independence, and they developed their own unique spin on some of these laws. But the originator of much of the law that we see around the globe started with Britain. Now, this next slide, I normally will never show it in a presentation, but the reason is I wanted to showcase the breadth of this particular series and how influential it is. Now, at Western Sydney, you have access to this particular archive, which is a really fantastic one. I've got some great examples that I'll showcase over here. And at the end of the year, we're coming out with another part of the series, which is looking at colonial law. So you can see that this is a series that we're invested in, and it's a series that we want to grow. And as we uncover content about law. We're digitizing that. But not all of this is relevant to Australia. Much of this is also very US focused. Like you can see, numbers 11 through to 13 are very US centric laws or archives about US. The ACLU, or the American Civil Liberties Union, papers 9 and 10, again, very American. People do tend to reflect back onto some of that because of precedent, which is a word which I'll use in a few slides today. So the unique thing about the Making of Law series is that each of these archives in the series stand on their own. So it doesn't matter whether you have, parts 1 or parts 2. Each has been designed to work individually on their own. Now, this individual that I've put up over here, Wendell Palmer, was actually responsible for reorganizing the English judiciary. Now, he served as Lord High Chancellor of Great Britain, and during his tenure, he passed something called the Judiciaries Act of 1873, which reorganized the English judiciary. Now, why that is important is because prior to that, there were multiple different courts. There was the Court of the Chancery, the Court of the Queen's Bench, there was Court of Common Pleas, the Court of the Exchequer, for example, the Court of Admiralty, the Court of this and that. But what he did was he said, hang on a second, there's too many of these courts, each interpreting the law in their own way. So he reorganized all of that into the Supreme Court of Justice, which was then categorized into two divisions, the High Court of Justice and the Court of Appeals. And that's something that many countries like Australia as well as America have adopted since as well. So that was a really important thing that happened in that Judiciaries Act established by Wendell Palmer. Now, all of this great content that we have in this series comes from multiple different source libraries, Harvard, Yale, Library of Congress. A lot of these great institutions collect a lot of this content and writings about law. So it's not just, monographs and manuscripts about laws. It's writings about laws. It's cases. And as we can see in a few minutes, trials as well, sensational trials, as I like to call them. Now, what's exciting about this archive is that it goes from 1600 to 1926. And if you can imagine the amount of crime and cases and trials that would have happened in that time period is just exciting. So it's roughly about 1.9 million pages over here. Much of this comes from Harvard, but also a little bit from Yale and the Library of from the city of New York. You can see over here. And it looks at Great Britain. It looks at the British Empire. When I say the British Empire, I'm including Australia in that as well in that time period, because you can see it's much before Australia, became a nation in itself. But what this archive contains is accounts of trials, like, for example, the Maybrick case, I think it was. It was about an American woman who was convicted in the United Kingdom of murdering her husband, who was a cotton merchant, and he was about 20, 25 years her senior. And she was sentenced to prison for about 14 years. And when she was released, here you go, here's the example. She actually released or published her memoir, My 15 Lost Years, which you can actually read all about it in this particular archive. So it's available over here. Now, in addition to that, the kinds of documents that you'll find over here are official trial documents, briefs, arguments, legislative proceedings, administrative proceedings, any arbitrations that would have happened. And it's one of the most full or complete full text collections of Anglo-American trials over here. There's more than 10,000 works. And also, one of the more exciting things about this particular archive and looking at these murder trials or court cases is the level of detail that some of these writings contain. Now, back before, TikTok and Instagram and Snapchat and how we got our news, cases and publications about trials were a source of entertainment for many of the individuals This is where they could read about all of the grisly crimes in great detail, word for word, verbatim of what was said in the court between the defendant and the claimant and the judge and the accused and all of them. All of their sayings were captured and available over here. And the example that I'll show you today, we'll see some examples of that. And that's really exciting as well. Now, a lot of these writings about these murder cases can also be found in historical newspapers. And I think we covered a session on historical newspapers earlier in the year. But historical newspapers, what they do is they give you public opinion about cases. Whereas in this particular archive, in this context, what we're seeing here are things that actually happened in the court, the proceedings of the court, the processes and procedures that went on behind the scenes for each individual cases in these trials. The newspapers will just give you a summarized account of the case itself. And often they tend to add a little bit of um, extra fluff because, at the end of the day, newspapers are a business and they have to sell. So they would add a little bit of extra, exclamations about some of the words that were said, or imagery to go along with the sayings and things like that. Um, So one of the interesting things about this particular archive to understand is the literature of these legal transcripts. They offer an unfiltered narrative into the daily lives of these everyday actors. And some of these trial publications are sometimes the best historical source we have for marriages, divorce, or questions that are raised about celebrity and crime. Today, we don't need to read, boring litigation documents. All we've got to do is open up Snapchat or Instagram and we can read about the latest Diddy trial or any of the other trials that are happening around us. But back in the day, this is how they would, learn about some of these trials. But they also had great insight into things like gender, race, um, the language, the theater of court cases, the drama of the trial. It looks at, the evolution of laws, criminology, and of course, most importantly, journalism and communication, how this information was captured and then communicated to the masses to talk about that. So in respect to categories of inclusion, what we've included in this archive are unofficial published accounts of trials, and they can include trials, briefing documents, arguments, any procedural content that was put, put together for that particular trial, like administrative proceedings, for example, and they cover multiple different crimes or subject areas like things like adultery, commercial law, constitutional law, elections, impeachment, international law, murder, slavery, the dispute of wills, or even dueling as well, because back in the day, that's what they did. Someone had an argument, they duel with one another, and if it was a gentleman's understanding, you shoot someone if you had a misunderstanding, but should that have gone to court, then that would have, there would have been a court case and a trial for that as well. But it covers some really sensational trials as well that are captured over here. Like this particular individual, Anson Bunker. I've got another great example that I'll show you. Uh, you know, Grisly crimes like murders of passion, for example. Some really exciting trials for you to browse through over here. I'll show you some examples and I'll show you my research question. There's also some fantastic literature on crime as well. Now, crime in literature has long been very compelling theme, captivating readers with tales of mystery, justice, morality, psychology, from ancient myths all the way to some more contemporary thrillers. Crime has not only been the plot point, but it has been the lens through which authors explore society's values, fears, ethical boundaries. So it's a really a good insight into, the literature that we can obtain from just reading through these crime novels. There's also some high-profile trials that are included in here as well, like the impeachment of Andrew Johnson, the president, in 1868. The trial for the individuals accused of the assassination of President Lincoln. You can see some of those mug shots, as I like to call them over there, of those individuals. Uh, then we've also got the infamous trial of Oscar Wilde from 1895. Oscar Wilde, as you'll be familiar, was a playwright, novelist, poet, and celebrity in the late 19th century London. His mistake was that he was a really flamboyant dresser, and he had an eccentric wit and eccentric lifestyle, and that put him at odds with the norms of Victorian England during that particular time. Therefore, he was accused, well, he was, but he was accused at that point in time of being a homosexual and put on trial for gross indecency in 1895. Um, uh, After the details of his affair with the British aristocrat were made public. Now, remember again, homosexuality was a crime at that point in time in England. And if you went against the grain, if you were a little bit extra flamboyant, obviously you would stick out like a sore thumb, like Oscar Wilde did. Therefore, and he was also a really successful playwright as well. I think much of his peers who were jealous of him may have instigated, putting him on trial for homosexuality. There's also another really interesting trial that's included over here, which is the Terra Nova incident of 1821. Now, this trial is unique because it illustrates the relationship between ships' crews and vendors. Well, like, a lot of these, during that particular point in time, 1821, a lot of these ships were sailing around the world, either whaling fleets or for trade, and they would, pull up into these ports, and a lot of these sailors would jump off and they would, barter or trade or buy from these local vendors. In this particular incident, it was in China, and one of the individuals who was an illiterate Italian seaman on the American ship, the Emily, was accused of killing a Chinese trader when they docked at the port. He began bargaining with this particular individual, and I think he didn't like what that person said. Probably he couldn't understand Chinese. That's what I'm going to go with. But what he did was really, it's literally out of the movies. He threw an olive jar that hit the head of that particular vendor, knocking him unconscious. He then falls into the water and drowns. You can't script this stuff. This is true life that happens. And the incident was that the Chinese wanted the American ship, the Emily, to turn over this individual to stand trial, and the American ship refused to hand over one of their crewmen to stand justice in a foreign land. Now, because of that, the Terra Nova incident, what had happened was the Chinese had suspended trade, till this individual was handed over to stand their brand of justice. And it showcases an international incident, and this is when these international incidents had consequences, like the impact on trade, for example. But what had eventually happened was, I think there was a lot of pressure from the vendors and the Chinese. The ship, the Emily, the captain ultimately handed over the Italian seaman who was accused of murder. And what did the Chinese do? Well, they did what they would do to gain justice. They strangled him a few days later to death. And that incident sort of then just withered away once they'd got their justice. But it showcases the mockery of justice, that this individual, it was clearly an accident. It wasn't intentional, but in this instance, the punishment fit the crime is what they were going with. So that's a really interesting thing to read, the Terra Nova incident. And there's also a great deal of content about Australia and New Zealand, crime that's in our own backyard that you can actually find over here. So to tell you that, let me tell you a little story about the Tichborne Romance. I'm not sure if you've heard about this, but it's a really interesting one. The Tichborne Romance is one of the most fascinating and legal social dramas of the 19th century. It's a real-life mystery that gripped the Victorian public, and it inspired numerous literary and cultural responses. It blended crime, identity, class, public spectacle into what many called at that point in time the greatest trial of the century. Now, the middle page that I put over there was really interesting. The reason I did that, because as I was looking through this document and reading through it, the second page of the document was a little advertisement for sewing machines. And I thought, wow, isn't that really interesting? They published an account of this trial verbatim, what happened in the court proceedings, but why not take the opportunity to throw in a little advertisement for sewing machines? And I found that really interesting and exciting as well to see that in a monograph. So let me tell you the story about this Tichborne Romance and its ties to Australia. So the story begins with an individual called Roger. I'm going to say Tichborne because I'm not sure how to pronounce that correctly, but I'm just going to say Tichborne. Roger was the heir to a really wealthy Catholic aristocratic family in England. And in 1854, Roger was presumed lost at sea while he was traveling from South America, I think, to Jamaica or something. Now, his mother, the lady Tichborne, refused to believe that he had died, and she clung on to hope that he had survived, as any parent would. But years later in 1866, and this happened in 1854. Now in 1866, a man from none other than our backyard, Wagga Wagga in Australia, came forward claiming to be Roger Tichborne. The man was actually an individual called Arthur Orton. He was actually a butcher's son with little education or resemblance to the aristocrat Roger Tichborne. And needless to say, the lady Tichborne actually accepted him as her son, possibly out of grief, desperation, or genuine belief that this could be her son who, spent many years lost at sea and has now returned a prodigal son. And that was really exciting. But reading through this particular story, what I uncovered was pretty much a page turner. You can see over here from the examples, it says in consequence that Lady Tichborne inserted advertisements in 1863. Now in 1866, Arthur Orton came forward claiming to be Roger Tichborne. But the reason for that is because in 1863, the Lady Tichborne inserted advertisements in the Australian colonies about her missing son. That could have been, this individual, this con man's sort of ticket to, fame and wealth. And the case, essentially, the whole legal case was about trying to prove that this individual is a con man and not the actual son of Lady Tichborne who was lost at sea. And the trial itself, it captivated the public for months. Many witnesses were called on both sides, some claiming to be convinced of this individual Arthur's authenticity, that he is indeed Roger and not this Australian man. And there were lots of contradictions to his story. But the case turned criminal when Arthur was actually tried for perjury, and he was found guilty and sentenced to 14 years of hard labor much later as well. But there was a public fascination with this particular case, media sensation. Thousands of working class people followed this case in great detail for many reasons. Well, the poor were sympathetic of, this underdog who's come back from the wilderness trying to claim back his family fortune, while the other part of the individuals were like, hang on a second, if this individual from Australia is claiming to be this aristocrat, and this aristocrat Roger Tichborne was fluent in French, was fluent in certain aristocratic customs and norms and etiquettes that this individual from Wagga Wagga did not speak French, had no social etiquette, and so there was a lot of back and forth about, hang on, how can he claim to be an aristocrat when he seems a bit of a ruffian and all of that. Then as you go through, you can see over here the name Arthur comes up, and it tells if you read somewhere in the middle of the passage, it says the sketch of the history of this man, Arthur Orton, who was the son of a butcher at Wapping, and his early career was spent much among the carcasses of sheep and oxen, and he was responsible for slaughtering them. And you can see over here, the defense or the people who were suing this individual were saying that, hang on a second, Sir Roger Tichborne has become food for the fishes. In other words, he's pretty much lost at sea, died, and Orton has taken upon himself to imitate the likeness of this individual to obtain the family wealth. So here's where it gets really exciting for, the public. The public always love to support the underdog, and without fact, a lot of them wanted to believe that this was indeed the long lost prodigal son come back to claim his family's wealth and fortune. But as you go through the document and you can read over here, it talks a little bit about, Sir Roger was brought up in France and he speaks French. He's an aristocrat. He's got aristocratic etiquette and values, which Arthur Horton has none of that. As you read through it, you'll find that a lot of people were saying that, maybe because he was, lost in a far-flung colony like Australia for so many years, he's forgotten much of who he is. But it's about 400 odd pages. And trust me, I'm one of the world's slowest readers. So I only read about 20 pages, skimming through it at best. But if you remember the story, Sir Roger Tichborne was sailing to Jamaica. Now, unless I skipped geography class in school, Jamaica and Australia are not close to each other. They are miles apart. So I'm not sure if that question was ever raised about, hang on a second, how does this equate? But there was public fascination and there was a cultural impact with this particular case. It became a media session. Thousands of people followed the daily court proceedings. Working class people sympathized with the claimant, seeing him as a symbol for anti-elitist struggle. And Victorian literature at that point in time were also reflected on their fascination with this story. There were cartoons, there were political pamphlets, there were stage plays that were put together to talk about this particular case. In fact, influential authors like Charles Dickens were intrigued by the psychological and social layers of this particular story: family, wealth, prodigal son. But some of the other themes that came out in this particular court case are issues of identity and memory, which, Arthur claims to have, forgotten, being lost at sea, forgot much of his French and his etiquette. It explored themes like class and power. It explored the legal theater. I think I've got another example here. You can see it's written verbatim in what was said in the court. Did you pay him in checks or notes? I sent him only one check. I generally send him a £5 note, and then so on and so forth. So it captures everything that was said in the court in this particular proceeding, and it was so exciting to actually have all of these, descriptions of this particular case. It's a really influential case. It's actually remembered today as not just a bizarre trial, but also it exposed, it's a window into the Victorian anxieties about authenticity and the role of law. I didn't have enough time to find out what exactly happened towards the end. It's quite a page turner. I'm not going to be the one to spoil the outcome for you. I'm going to show you where to go find it on the archive in a few minutes. But it's a really enduring, mysterious legal history. There's romance in there, and there's so much that this particular case talks about. And of course, it's also talking about, one of our locals from Wagga Wagga in South Australia. All right. So that's just a little story over there. Let me go quickly into the demonstration and I'll show you how to browse through that archive. Okay, so I'm going to start with the Gale product menu as always, and you go into primary sources. Now the Gale product menu, how did I get to this page? Let's open up Making Modern Law Trials. You may have this particular archive listed as a link on your library catalog, which is fine. If you go to the top left-hand corner and click this option here, select Gale product menu, that will bring up all of the content that is available to you at Western Sydney. Now, why I wanted to show you this is in this product menu page, we have something called cross search, which cross searches all of the archive that you've got access to. So I'm going to use the Gale Primary Sources cross searching platform to begin with, because I wanted to show you the wealth of content that's available for this particular case. So I'll go into, here we are in advanced search, and I'm just going to type Tichborne. I'm just going to go Tichborne without anything, keyword. Oh, sorry, go back a step. Go. Oh, here we go, entire document. Okay, you can see over here, there was about 500 odd monographs available for this particular case containing that one, the Tichborne mystery. But there's 43,000 newspaper periodicals that you can read through about this particular case. And that's what the Gale Primary Sources does. It cross searches everything you've got access to. If you use the filter option on the right-hand panel, you can see over here, from Making a Modern Law Trials, there's about 109 documents that talk about that particular case, the Tichborne Romance. Well, you can see there's 39,000 articles in British Library newspapers that cover that. And again, like I said, this is before Instagram and Snapchat, and newspapers they were in love with court cases, grisly murders, and something like the Tichborne case, which involves, wealth. It involved a long lost son. It involved identity. Trust me, newspapers were going to capture this in immense detail, and as it's evident from the amount of content that we've got over here. But it also appears surprisingly in other archives as well, women's studies as well, possibly because it may have covered the lady Tichborne as well. So who knows? But let's look at Making a Modern Law. Now, again, with all primary sources, any Gale archive, start with the Learning Center. The Learning Center is an all-in-one instructional portal to orient new users, to give you context about what this archive is all about. Start by reading through about this archive, which will give you a little bit of a background of this particular archive, where this content is coming from, what you can actually find in this particular archive. And you can see there's a little bit of a write-up about the trials. If you're not sure where to start, if you want to find other cases like, the Roger Tichborne case, come into sample topics and searches. Great starting point for students. You can see there's things like insanity as a defense plea. I may want to use that one day, but you can use that. You can search for espionage. You can search for the murderess. And it goes through with detail on how to go about using these terms and searching for content in the archive. Now, when searching an archive, it's always good to start with a research question. What it is you're actually trying to uncover from this great content. My research question, and I actually stumbled upon that particular case, but now I can formulate a research question. Was Arthur Orton really Roger Tichborne, for example, to something to that effect? But you can see we've got research questions to start as the basis for you to go in and start to explore. And then, of course, there's, some more examples over here as well. There's a content advisory because, again, given the time period, there will be content that you may consider offensive or derogatory, for example, but look at it through the lens of history. This is the language that was used in that particular point in time. We've also got the topic finder and the term frequency, search tips, Topic Finder and Term Frequency are probably my two favorite tools across databases and archives because one, Topic Finder visualizes your search results and the term frequency will find or plot the occurrence of content across a timeline. And I'll show you that in a moment. But there's also other stuff like, research examples, how to reuse the content. And depending on the archive, that you're browsing, you may even find case studies where we've commissioned academics to write a case study for to contextualize the archive itself. But let's look at these Topic Finder and the term frequency. Now, Topic Finder is two ways you can use it. From the homepage, you can click Topic Finder, start your search. Or the other way, which is a better way to do it, is start by doing a keyword search. So I'll go TSC, Hborne, Tichborne. And you can see over here, there's 109 results. It's not a lot. So with 109 results, I can select the topic finder from this example from the search results page, and that will visualize those 109 results into thematical clusters, which I can then look at in a moment. When it loads up, you can see over here, all of that content has been grouped together in these thematic clusters. Famous trial, Arthur Horton being the imposter who claimed to be Roger Tichborne, Esquire, trial of William Palmer, and all of this must be associated with that particular case. If I go back to the homepage and I'll click on the Gale logo, if I go term frequency, I can type that over here, TSE-HBORNE. Let's just say I'm starting with this. Now I know this happened in the 1800s, so I'll just go 1850 onwards, and I want to see the mentioning of that particular name. And surprisingly, you can see during the time of the trial over here, there's about 9 documents that talk about that. But this case has been so influential that it's actually been mentioned through the ages all the way up to 1927. Now, if you're interested to see what they had to say about Tichborne in 1911, click on this plot point here, and that will take you into these 3 documents over here that contain that. Now, this one says the trial of Franz Muller, but I'm wondering why. So I'll go keyword preview, and let's see how that term that I'm interested in is used. He was a counsel for the Tichborne claimant in the original. There you go. So basically, in this case, the I'm assuming the lawyer was counsel for Tichborne, whoever, either Arthur or the people who were suing him. So another keyword over here. It's probably the same thing over here. Yeah, so it looks like the same document, but from a different publisher. This one's from Edinburgh and London. This one is from Cromarty Law Book Company. So yeah, it's just a matter of difference. Well, let's go back to the home screen and let's do a keyword search again. TSE HBORNE, Tichborne. The document that I pulled up and I was fascinated with was this document over here, 444 odd pages. I'll just click that to open it up. It's quite a page turner. So the weekend's coming up. If you've got nothing to do, trust me, this is a really interesting thing to browse through. Well, when I was looking through this and I said, let's just browse through and see what this is about. Page 2. Oh, actually, it's page 3. Oh, page 4. Oh, maybe I opened a different document. I'm trying to find the advertisement. Oh, hang on a second. We'll click this option over here, which will find that advertisement. Oh, there we go. It is page 2. So this advertisement for sewing machines that I thought was really interesting in terms of its placement in this particular document, but it's there for a lot of the content, believe it or not. But anyway, while we're staying on this page, this is how most of the content looks across Gale archives. At the top here, as usual, we've got, your citation. You can download this to your Google Drive, your Microsoft OneDrive. You can email this document to a friend. In fact, when emailing, you can choose to email it to yourself as well, depending on what you're more comfortable with. You can also download this as well. You can download it as a PDF, selected pages, or the OCR. The OCR is optical character recognition, and to turn that on, you can do that over here on the left-hand panel under View Options. both text and image, click that option, and the OCR, which is all of that text, is available over here for you to download. And of course, there's accessibility features like the brightness of the text, for example. You can reduce the brightness and you can see if there's any, red herring or handwriting on the side of the pages. Or if you've got reading difficulties, you can also invert the colors on the page as well. Different people have different ways in which they absorb this content. Back up here, you've got download, print, and the get link, which is a persistent URL that will bring you back. If you copy this link and embed this in your assignment, in your article, anyone clicking this link will bring you back to this particular document here. For an instructor, it's a great way to also create reading lists as well. So you can copy this link and embed that into your reading lists for students, or it can be saved onto your LMS systems as well. And anyone that clicks this link will come back to this particular document. If the user has access to, the WSU systems, if they're a student or an academic at the university, they can browse through all 444 odd pages. But if you shared something like this on social media, and if someone clicked the link, what they will see is just the page for which that link was generated, which is this page over here. Now, this section is actually really exciting as well. It gives you an overview of this particular document. Now, in this particular archive, there's not a lot of information, but in some of our other archives, there's more information that will appear here, like the manuscript number. If it's state papers, for example, it'll tell you what series of state paper that particular document is from. In some instances, in more recent years, we've started capturing how these documents are being stored. So if they're being stored physically in boxes, we will put that information in here, box 1 of 21, document number XYZ, for example, because researchers may have traveled physically to those locations and they may be intimately aware of this, the physical storage aspects of it. So that's what this section is here. Now in Find, you can see I've typed the word Tichborne, and it's showcasing all of the pages that word appears in. So if I click keyword preview, you can see the OCR is over here. There, it highlights the word on the page very quickly, making it easy for you to be able to find. And again, the best way to enjoy this content is always to go into full screen and then maybe a half page, and then you can just use your mouse and sort of scroll up. Or if you wanted to sort of move through the pages, you can see over here again, I'll show you that. Sorry, of course. It's this option over here, which is like a thumbnail view. Oops. Which allows you to see all of the pages in this particular document over here. And there's about 400. In view options, from time to time, if there are illustrations or images in a document, we will see an option here that says illustrations, drawings, or photographs. There's none in this particular document, but because it's a monograph, we've got a book, we've got page numbers, and you can go through the different sections of this particular document over here, and of course, a full set of citations. So that is just a very quick snapshot of this particular archive. And again, if you ever search the keyword, we do have filter options over here that you can use to curate your content further. From your search results, you can also click on Gale Primary Sources, which will take you to the cross-searching platform where you can then cross-search this particular term across all the archives that you've got access to as well. So it's pretty intuitive and easy to use, but there's some really fascinating crimes over here. If you go back into term frequency, let's say you're interested in a few key terms like, stock standard, MURD, murder, and maybe crime. And what else can aliens? Aliens never going to come up in this. Let's just go with murder and crime for now. And you can see the amount of content that contain our two key terms, murder and crime. Now, here's a little trick. If you want to isolate these search results to a specific period, just use your mouse. So you can see over here, this is 1805. Maybe I want 1800. Use your mouse and drag, and you can see, I was going to point to the screen, but you can see that little pop-up box that says 1890. Maybe I'll go 1820. and it isolates those search results for that particular time period. And you can see over here, um, there's a lot more crime and less murder. And in a perfect world, that's actually a good thing. Less murder, more. Well, both are in a perfect world. We don't want both to happen, but it's always better to have more crime and less murder than have none at all, to be honest. So I'm gonna go back. I'll just see if there's anything else in my PowerPoint that I haven't covered. Nope, that's pretty much all of my presentation for today. So I'll stop sharing this if anyone's got any questions.
It looks absolutely fantastic. The access to those primary ancient trials is really, really fabulous.
It is, and reading through those trials, I will say very quickly, is like reading a novel today because they really poured their hearts out into painting a picture with words on what actually happened. And if you look at some of those trials and some of the crimes, you'd 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 be or I'd be foolish to think that those crimes are not repeated. Much of what we're seeing today was actually done hundreds of years ago.
Mm.
So it's really exciting to see that.
Yeah, I was going to get you for the extra search term with murder and crime, to put poison in.
Oh, let's do that.
Yeah.
Hang on, I've got it there.
Because that we've got a trial on at the moment, mushroom poisoning.
Oh, that's fine. Actually, I'm going to whisper this. I've my aunt's visiting, and the day she came over, I said, "I'm going to cook lunch for you. Would you like some beef Wellington?" She feels like I'm going back immediately. Like poison. Poison.
That's really current, Francine. That topic.
No, it isn't actually. If you look at, let's just isolate that. You can see over here, poison is actually there.
Yeah, it was used a lot in the old days.
Absolutely.
Arsenic in particular.
Yes.
Yeah. Rat poison.
Was the main choice. Actually, if you look at crimes in the old in the 1800s, if it involved swords and guns, you can equate that to men. Poison was more the choice of women because it was subtle and it was effective and it was just odorless as well.
Yep.
But yeah, and maybe let's just add. Let's add another on go. KNIVES and maybe pistols. Sorry. Now I'm saying pistols because I don't think they actually called them guns. They would have called them pistols. So let's isolate maybe from the 1800, just a quick snapshot. Oh, that's actually interesting.
So I have a question there. So that is displaying, that's an or that's murder or crime or poison. Those are not. Oh, okay. It's just searching for that individual term. Yep. Okay. Not where it exists together. I get it.
Yes. So these, what I'm doing in this instance over here is the occurrence of each of these terms independently, just to look at a sort of a usage. But if you wanted to look at murder, then I do it over here. Murder or...
Oh, okay. Or you could put murder and poison.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, quite a few.
There we go.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure which line is murder and poison. Oh, it's the blue one. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
There we go. So, yep, there's it's a nice way to see trends and to see how much of content. Again, if you wanted to read any one of that, just click on the plot point and it'll take you straight in there and you can then read all about that.
And what's the difference between frequency and popularity? What is popularity measuring?
That's actually frequency, I know, is the occurrence of that.
Yeah.
Popularity is actually a very good question. That's a very different graph. I've never explored popularity for some reason, but maybe, hang on, to the learning center or bat cave. Term frequency, let's see, it doesn't actually say much about the difference.
That's okay. I can explore it if figure it out.
I'll try to find out as well for my reference in the next demonstration as well. Cool. Any other questions?
No, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'll leave it at that.